Welcome. Today we're going to be changing the rear shock on this here SV650 track bike, and we're going to replace it with this here Penske. So if you've already seen my SV650 track bike walk around video, you'll recall that this is a budget build, and there are some differences from the stock SV650 already at this point. If you haven't seen that, I'll catch you up here briefly as it regards the rear shock. Check it out if you want to see the whole walk around and get the details on everything else. This is a 2004 GSXR 1000 rear shock, and I bought it used and I've never rebuilt it, so it's definitely past its prime. I took this to my local suspension shop, Evolution Motorcycles, and got a quote for a rebuild on it, $471. So at that price, I'm looking at maybe some used Penske shocks, or other brands would be suitable as well. What I did find that met my budget was this older Penske 8981 unit. So you'll hear a few different numbers tossed around: 8981, 8983, 8987, and I'll just briefly kind of gloss over the differences there. The 8981 is the older unit. This was probably built about 20 years ago, in fact, but it's in fantastic shape. It's got only 6 adjustments for your compression, and that's the main difference between the 8981 and 8983, which has many, many more adjustment settings there. I think this is going to be fine for my pace and for this bike in particular. If I was racing for money, it might be a different story, but I'm far from that. So the 8987 is what you might hear referred to as a triple clicker, and that's got high and low speed compression adjustment settings. Again, beyond the scope of the bike build, and it's beyond the scope of me as a rider, frankly. So what we're going to do here is put this on, take the old one off, and I'll show you how that's done. So you'll see I have removed the belly pan to get access to the bottom of the shock. I've also removed the rear wheel entirely. You can change out a rear shock without moving the rear wheel. I do not recommend it. The reason for that is the weight of the wheel will put the linkages in a bit of a bind, and you have to lift up on that, release some pressure from that to get the bolts out. It's just a lot easier if you remove the rear wheel altogether. So what we need to do here is we need to remove this bolt from the top of the dog bones. That will allow them to rotate down, and then we can get access to that bolt on the bottom of the shock. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get in there because it's too close and it's completely covered up by the dog bone. So what we're going to do here is completely unload the rear suspension, other than the weight of the swing arm itself, by putting some jack stands underneath the foot pegs, and then we can get to business there, taking apart the suspension. With a combination of 17 and 14 millimeter ratchets and wrenches, you will be able to take care of this entire job from this point on. So the first thing we're going to do is drop this upper dog bone. And once we remove this bolt, the dog bone will rotate down, get out of our way. We'll need to reduce a little bit of the pressure that the swing arm is putting on it. There we go. Just got to find that sweet spot there. Don't lift up too much. And there we go. Dog bones down. All tension from the swing arm is removed. And now we have access to the bottom bolts on our shock. Now at this point we have a 14 millimeter on each end. There's not a lot of room between the shock bolt and the exhaust there, so there we go. Can loosen that and remove it. Again, we'll just lift up on the swing arm a little bit there. There you can see the shock slide free. Free and clear at the bottom. Now we can get to the top bolt on the shock. Again, that's 14 millimeters each side. Alright, I can just pull that out and remove our shock. A little bit of shimmy there, and we'll get her out. Right? We will get her out. One way or another. We'll get it out. There we go. Tilt it a little bit. So as we look at the shocks, we'll see some notable differences here. For one thing, the reservoir is attached. It's integrated on the Gixxer shock, whereas it's remote on the Penske. And if I had my way, I wouldn't have gotten this 90-degree joint here. I'd have the longer hose with it mounting inline and mounted along the bottom of the frame rail, but I got an idea for a solution to that. Another thing you'll see is that there is some height difference. Now the Penske is adjustable to a certain degree. The Gixxer is fixed in length, and of course, it was intended for one specific bike, so they didn't need to build that into it so much. But there is a big difference, and this is the way I'm going to set mine up. So if you measure the length of the shocks, you could do that, and they say measure it from center to center of the holes. Of course, you can measure it top to top, bottom to bottom, whatever, because they're about the same diameter hole. So what we're seeing with this one is I have it set to about 345, slightly under, I suppose. And that's really based on a recommendation from LWT Racer. Definitely check out his videos and his website for tons of information on this kind of thing. I do. He's way faster than me as a Moto America racer himself. So if we look at the length eye to eye on the Gixxer shock, we're looking at about, if I put the bolts in here, it'd be a little easier to measure, but we're looking at about 325. So there's a significant difference in height that we're going to see here, and that should help the turn in. It should be a little quicker to turn in, and that's going to help quite a bit. So there are times when I just have to really kind of struggle to get the bike to tip in, and that shouldn't be the case on an SV650. So looking forward to that not being the case on this particular bike. We'll see though. There's plenty of adjustments that we're going to need to make when we hit the track. Installing the new shock is exactly the same as removing the old shock, except in reverse, of course. So nesting it in there in that little space in front of the swing arm, attaching the top and the bottom of the shock, attaching the dog bone to the swing arm, and there you have it. Your new shock is installed. Of course, this one has that external reservoir, so I needed a solution for that. I wouldn't mount to the bottom of the rear subframe, as most do, so I took advantage of those pre-threaded holes that were already in the subframe and I got some extruded aluminum U-channel, and basically what I did was make a template in Adobe Illustrator. Any CAD type program will work just fine. So I like to draw everything out and make sure I know what it's going to look like, and then I start cutting materials. So basically just cutting it to length, making it the shape I needed, because I needed to cut a couple of the sides out, drill a couple of holes, and file everything to make sure I had no sharp edges left. That's that. So now the bracket is complete. I have something to hang my external reservoir on. This is about a 7/8 inch aluminum U channel, and I've cut that down so that it will nest in between the rails of the subframe, and these holes are spaced appropriately so it will attach to the threaded fasteners that are welded into the subframe. Those are a really handy location for those. I don't even recall what they're for originally, but they're going to work perfectly for what we need. I've gone ahead and rounded the ends off as well to make sure that they don't snag on anything. And all we need to add to these are something you can purchase from eBay. It's a kit to mount your external reservoir. So it comes with a couple of rubber pieces here that are contoured for the reservoir, and a pair of 3-inch clamps, hose clamps. So that said, let's get to putting it on. I do want to point out that I did take the shock to my suspension specialist to have him look it over and make sure everything was good to go before I started, and also have him measure the spring rate, so at least I knew where I was starting. And I was a little disappointed when he got back to me and said it's a variable rate spring. He gave me the specs on it, but he did say that everything else checked out and it looked really good and didn't need any service. So I was happy to hear that you know, I bought what I thought I bought. So I just went to the track with it as it was, and fortunately that first track day I had Dave Moss Tuning, of course, take a look at it, and that entire day he told me, don't change a thing on the back, it's absolutely perfect. So that's what I did, followed his advice, and it's really worked out nice for me. It turns in so much nicer than it did before. There were times where I was struggling. I was only getting the knee down in a few corners, and it was like flipping a switch. It got my turn-in so smooth and so eager that I was dragging the knee just at will, wherever I wanted, left, right, made no difference. So I'm super happy with how this has really transformed the bike. I will say that it did lead to some other complications. So raising that shock by nearly 20 millimeters, I think it was 18 specifically, lifted the seat height, obviously, on the bike by lifting the whole back end up, and that did put more stress on my forearms to the point where I had actually gotten arm pump, which is something you usually only hear with motocrossers, but occasionally road racers. I know Sean Dillon Kelly had it and is still recovering from it, his second surgery on that. But that's something I've taken steps to address, so check out that video as well. I'll link to it at the end of this one. I raised the bars up with some Woodcraft adjustable risers, and they worked fantastic. So problem solved. Bike handle's great, now I'm comfortable. Can't recommend this enough. Get yourself a shock that's variable in length, and get the back end of your SV up, and you'll be really happy with it.